Hey Rich Girls, Kirby here. Welcome to another episode of Rich Girls Guide. We've made it, ladies and gentlemen. We are on episode 4, the final episode of our 401k series. Woo! Today, we are going to be answering the most popular question I always get about 401ks and retirement in general. How much money should I be contributing to make sure that I can retire? Before we dive in, I want to say a huge thank you for tuning in today. If you find this information helpful and want to support me so that I can make more content for you, please follow wherever you are tuning in right now. And a super quick reminder that you can view these in video format on YouTube and Spotify. Please note, this is not financial advice. This is simply my opinion and should be used for entertainment purposes only. Right off the bat, you already know what my first response is going to be. How much should you be saving? And the total amount you need saved prior to retirement is going to be vastly different from one person to the next. I hate seeing articles that blanketly say, if you don't have X amount of dollars saved before you retire, should you really retire? Knowing how much you need can be a daunting task, but it doesn't have to be. We can easily reverse engineer that figure. We just need to know a few pieces of information, use our handy dandy calculator, or in this case, Excel, to break down exactly how much we need to be saving. Now, I know some of you are thinking right now, there are future value calculators I can use online to do this. We don't need to build it ourselves in Excel. And to that I say, how well have those future value calculators worked out for you? If you've kept up with it, good for you. However, I have a feeling you probably put stuff in there once and never looked at it again. Personally, I have found that if I put in the time and effort to create something, whether it be a budget or in this case, a retirement calculator myself, and I periodically check on it and update it and hold myself accountable, I am so much more likely to follow whatever plan I laid out for myself. All right, so today I would highly recommend using Excel since we are going to be working with a lot of numbers and we're going to be creating some formulas. Don't worry, I'm going to walk you through everything step by step. For today, a calculator is just really not going to cut it. If you are cheap like me and do not pay for the official Microsoft Excel, you can just navigate to your Gmail account, pull up Google Apps, and click on Sheets. Voila! The first couple of figures you will need to write down are as follows: your current total annual expenses, the age at which you would like to retire, and how much you already have saved for retirement. I know I just threw a lot at you, so let's break it down. First, we have total annual expenses. I find it easier to start with my monthly expenses and then work my way into the annual expense figure. If you do not already have a budget in place or need help figuring out what your monthly expenses are, let's go ahead and break down just normal categories: rent or mortgage, groceries, eating out, any like car payments or other loan payments, car insurance, utilities, TV and internet, phone bill, toiletries, hair and nail appointments, and then just like clothing, entertainment, and I always recommend throwing in just a miscellaneous for random shit that pops up. You can also download a budgeting app. I personally use Rocket Money, and once you link your bank accounts and credit cards, it will actually tell you exactly how much you are spending month to month and in what categories, whether or not you want to know. Now, there are a few things you do not want to include in this figure. If you are a parent and you pay for daycare or babysitting expenses, do not include those. And then also any savings that you put away on a monthly basis into your retirement, do not include those. Essentially, any expense that you will not incur in retirement, we're going to leave that to the side. Now, some of you may have just had an idea. Well, Kirby, I get my hair and nails done every month right now, but I'm definitely not going to once I retire. Do not go through and cut out certain expenses like that because you don't think you'll want to do it in retirement. Aside from those larger expenses I just mentioned, like daycare and retirement savings, you are generally going to spend the same amount of money that you did prior to retirement in retirement. Did the word retirement just lose all meaning? Just because you don't think you'll have your monthly nail appointment does not mean you won't want to go instead play some bingo or spoil some potential grandkiddos. Or who knows, maybe you'll be that hot AF granny with amazing nails and hair. Once you have that monthly number, multiply it by 12 months in the year, and we are going to add 2 numbers to that figure. If you need to pay personal property taxes on any vehicles, make sure to add the annual personal property amount to your annual expense. This is an expense that most people tend to miss when making their monthly budget, since it's not something you're typically paying every month. You're only paying it like once or twice a year. If there are any other large expenses you can think of that you only pay once or twice a year that aren't already added into your budget, add them now. Think country club memberships, pole dancing classes, recreational sports. Add it now. Additionally, I like to add an annual traveling expense. So let's say we plan on taking 2 vacations per year. We're going to plan on spending like $3,000 per trip. So I'm gonna go ahead and add $6,000 to that total annual expense. Okay, so we have our current annual expense. As a side note, if that number looks really big and seems to be more than what you actually bring home every year, I got you. I'm going to be dropping a budgeting episode and a budgeting challenge to start off the new year in January. For now, we are using the annual expense figure we just calculated. Next up is the age at which you would like to retire. Obviously, this is not going to be set in stone and can be changed at any time. In fact, this entire exercise is something that should be considered a living, breathing exercise. Circumstances will change, expenses may go up or down, and we can update our plan as needed throughout the years. So I'm gonna set my retirement age as 65 because that is when Medicare kicks in currently, and I don't really wanna pay for private health insurance for 5 years. If you do want to try and retire early, just keep in mind you will need to save more now and you will need to spend less in retirement. On that note, if you are planning to retire prior to age 65 and you do not work in like the armed forces or otherwise will have access to government paid healthcare prior to age 65, make sure you are adding in that annual expense of private healthcare from whenever you retire to age 65. Now, obviously this will be a bit of a guessing game right now, but you can Google the average cost of health insurance for the age you retire, or you can just check out this article on Forbes. I'll link it in the show notes. Let's just use 60 as an example. According to this article, the average monthly cost for health insurance for a 60-year-old is roughly $1,100. Yikes. So you'll need to multiply whatever that number is by 12 and tack it onto your annual expenses up until age 65. Okay, now that we have a tentative retirement age, let's move on to our next figure. How much you already have saved for retirement. This should be pretty easy to find. We are just going to add up all of your retirement accounts. So any IRAs, 401ks, or if you have investment accounts that are specifically earmarked for retirement. If you are married, make sure to combine both yours and your spouse's retirement accounts together. Retirement planning should be a group activity. To err on the side of caution, because I always want people to be over-prepared for retirement as opposed to under-prepared, we are going to treat all of your retirement money as pre-tax or traditional, because we'll be taking taxes into account later on. Okay, so now comes the fun part, calculating in Excel. First, we are going to make a column with our current age and write out each year until we hit that age of retirement. In my case, 65. Fun little Excel hack. If you type out 3 cells with the numbers, you want to highlight those 3 cells, and then you're going to drag down on the bottom right-hand side on that little corner. You're going to drag it all the way down until you hit your desired number, 65. Whoops. All right, and if you go too far, you can just highlight those extra cells and just delete them. Okay, so now we have a row for each year from now until retirement. If you are an Excel whiz and you want to get some extra credit, you could separate these out by month instead of by year. For the sake of today's video, we are just going to stick with years. Next, we want to figure out how much we are going to be spending on an annual basis in retirement, but not in today's dollars, future us dollars. You see, our current annual expense amount is based on the value of $1 today. Because of inflation, my monthly expenses are not going to be $7,006. They're going to be way higher than that. Now, traditionally, I have used 2% as my annual inflation rate. Having said that, inflation has been a bit out of control the past few years, so you may want to increase that inflation percentage up to like 2.5% or even 3%. Again, if you want to err more on the side of caution and just be more conservative, be over-prepared instead of under-prepared, you're going to want to push that inflation number up a little bit higher. For today's episode, I'm going to stick with 3%. Okay, so we are now going to create a column right next to our age column that says annual expenses. Just a quick reminder that you can see exactly what I am doing on Excel if you watch this episode on YouTube or Spotify. I am currently sharing my screen with y'all. Okay, so I am going to type in my current annual expenses right next to my current age, or you can type in the equal sign and then click on the cell with your annual expense, and it will pre-populate into that cell. Okay, so we are now going to add in our inflation. So directly underneath of that cell with our current annual expenses, you are going to type in the following: equal sign, open parentheses. You're going to click on the cell directly above you, which is your current annual expenses. Type in the multiplication symbol or star. Click on the cell with your inflation percentage, close parentheses, plus symbol. Click the cell directly above you, which is your current annual expenses, and hit enter. Voila! You now have your expenses for next year adjusted for inflation. Now, before we do anything else, we are going to lock in our inflation cell by adding in $2 to our formula. One directly before the inflation cell column and one directly before the inflation cell row. Alternatively, you can type in the percentage as a number. If you're using 3% like me, you will want to type in 0.03. The reason I like to lock in my inflation cell is if I ever want to update that percentage, I can just type it in right here and it will automatically update without me having to mess with the formula. Regardless of which way you decide to handle inflation, we do not have to enter that formula again. We just need to click on that cell with the formula entered. We're going to hover over that same bottom right-hand corner till you see those little crosshairs, and then you're going to drag that bottom right-hand corner down all the way to our age of retirement. Magic! So you can see that currently at age 29, my expenses started at $84,072. Whew, that's a lot. Due to 3% inflation year over year, by the time I retire at age 65, those exact same expenses will cost me $243,664. Wonderful. Hence why we need to invest our money so that it keeps pace and hopefully outpaces inflation. Now, before I have a know-it-all Ned up in my comment section saying, but you included your mortgage in those expenses. Your mortgage won't go up with inflation. I know. So that today's episode is not hours and hours long. We are taking a shortcut and including our mortgage and car payment into our expenses. I would actually argue that with home maintenance and car maintenance, you are still going to have expenses closer to the numbers I just gave, but I digress. If you are really going for those gold star extra credit points today, you can add an extra column next to your annual expenses titled expenses that will not go up with inflation. And you will just need to exclude the principal and interest portion of your mortgage from your annual expenses. You still want to keep the escrow portion of your mortgage, which is just taxes and home insurance, included in the column that will go up with inflation. And add any of those static expenses into this second column that will stay the same year over year. Next, we are going to be morbid and pick a year that we're gonna die.
Why would you say that?
You guys didn't know we'd be predicting our own deaths now, did ya? I am going to be conservative and use age 100, even though I'm pretty sure the average age for females right now is like 94. Oh my god, I just googled the average lifespan of females in the US and it is 79. What? Oh man, okay. Do not use 79. Again, we want to be over prepared rather than under prepared. At least go with like 90. We're shooting for the stars over here, okay? Alrighty, let's go ahead and add some extra rows. We're gonna go from our retirement age to our super precise year of death. We are also going to drag down our expenses to that year of death as well. All right, I am going to highlight this whole section or just change the color so that I can clearly see like what expenses are going to be incurred in retirement. I am then going to calculate how much money I will need to fully cover my retirement by adding all of these annual expenses incurred in retirement together. All right, so I'm going to type in the equal sign, the word sum, S-U-M, open parentheses. I'm going to highlight all of these cells that are my annual expenses in retirement, and then close parentheses. And my grand total comes to $15,418,073. Kill me now. Important to note, this is not the dollar amount that I need to save by the time I retire. Once we reach retirement and we start pulling funds from our retirement bucket, the bucket will still be invested. It's going to continue to grow and fluctuate with the market. We've also not yet taken taxes or other streams of income into account. So let's go ahead and do that now. If we need to take all of these funds out of our investments, aka we are fully funding retirement from our retirement bucket, we will want to apply our tax rate to this entire figure. Those who will need to fully fund their retirement from their retirement bucket are not banking on Social Security. Personally, I'm not banking on Social Security. We are not expecting a pension from our employer. And we essentially have no other streams of income coming into our checking accounts in retirement. For me personally, I am hoping to have some rental income from investment properties that we acquire prior to retirement. If and when property is acquired, I would just add a column labeled rental income, put in the dollar amount of current rental income into whatever year that occurs, inflate that amount out to my death, and then subtract that income from our retirement expenses. Having said all of that, we do not currently have any rental property, so I fall under this category of fully funding retirement via my retirement bucket, which is probably going to be the same for a lot of you younger folks listening right now. For my older listeners who have other income either through Social Security or from a pension, you will want to do the same thing I just did for my pretend rental property. Add in a column, add your income each year you will receive, and then make a column right next to that one that subtracts your income from your retirement expenses. This column will give you the difference between the income that you will be receiving and your expenses, which is going to be the income you need to make up with your retirement bucket. Now, to account for taxes, obviously we have no idea what the tax brackets will be by the time we retire. So for simplicity's sake, I would just use your current tax bracket. I'll put a link to a website that actually shows the tax brackets for 2023. For me, that would be 24%, and I'm going to assume a 5% state income tax, which brings my total tax to 29%. Since I am assuming I will have to pay tax on all of this money I am taking out of my retirement account, I am going to left click and insert a column to the right and go to the row in which my retirement will start. Here, my inflated expenses total $243,664. That means my expenses, the after-tax amount of money I will need, totals the $243,000. I will actually need to withdraw an extra 29% to pay Uncle Sam. So in this new column, I'm going to type in the equal sign, click on my annual expenses in the first year of retirement, the multiplication or star symbol, and then 0.29, which is 29%, and hit enter. So I am guesstimating that I will owe roughly $70,663 in both federal and state taxes during my first year of retirement. Great. We will want to drag that formula down for all years of retirement, and we are going to sum up that column and get a whopping $4,471,241. Okay, so now we want to add up our expenses in retirement and our taxes in retirement to get our total amount needed to fund retirement, which for me is just shy of $20 million. What is happening right now? So now that you have your pants, let's get to the fun part, adding in our retirement savings. Alrighty, so we are going to go to the top of our spreadsheet and add in a column for retirement savings. We are going to start with what we have already saved. If you have nothing saved yet, not to worry, just type in 0. If you do have savings, type in equals and click on that cell that tallies up your total retirement bucket. Okay, so now we're going to use some of our educated guessing for the growth rate of our retirement savings, essentially the annual rate of return on our investments. Again, since I am erring on the side of caution, being a little bit more conservative, I'm going to use an annual growth rate of 8%. I would definitely not go above 10%, even if you have a high risk tolerance. Anything between 6 to 9% will work. Right next to that, I'm going to type in a post-retirement annual growth rate, because once we actually hit retirement, we're going to take some of that risk off of the table. If you remember from last week's episode, the closer we get to needing funds, the less risk we want to have, which in turn will lead to a lower rate of return. I'm going to use 5% as my post-retirement growth rate. Please feel free to use 4% if you think you're going to be, more risk averse, or go up to 6% if you intend to keep some risk on the table. I would definitely not go above 6% for your post-retirement growth. Okay, so looking at our retirement savings column, we are going to type in a formula directly under that first year of retirement savings. Type in the equal sign, open parentheses, click on the cell directly above that, type in the multiplication sign or star symbol, click on your pre-retirement growth rate, close parentheses, plus sign, and click on the cell directly above you and press enter. Again, we will want to lock in that pre-retirement growth cell. So you will want to add a $sign directly before that cell column and directly before that cell row. We are now going to drag that cell down to populate the column all the way down to the year before retirement. And bam, instant relief. Look at that big old number. So assuming I make no other contributions to my retirement savings and I average 8% over the next 35 years, I will have a little over $1.5 million. Not too shabby for having just a little over 100,000 right now. Now, the reason we stopped the year prior to retirement is because we will want to switch our growth rate in retirement over to our post-retirement growth rate. So we'll type in essentially the same formula starting in the year of retirement. Type in the equal sign, open parentheses, click on the cell directly above that. Type in the multiplication sign or star symbol, click on your post-retirement growth rate, close parentheses, plus sign, and click on the cell directly above you. Press enter. Again, we want to lock in that post-retirement growth cell. So you will want to add a $sign directly before that cell column and directly before that cell row. Drag it down all the way to the very end. Okay, now we need to add another column, annual retirement savings. Here is where the magic will start to happen. I'm going to start out with basically the minimum that goes into my retirement each year, which is $6,000. We are going to mess around with this number, so if you know it off the top of your head, how much you contribute annually, go ahead and put that here. Otherwise, just put in a nice, clean, easy number for now. Go ahead and just drag that all the way down, obviously stopping the year right before retirement. Okay, perfect. So once you have some kind of savings in your annual retirement savings column, we are going to make one edit to our retirement savings formula. Go ahead and click on the second row in that column, which is the first cell that should have a formula. We are just going to add one thing here, the plus symbol, and click on the first cell under annual retirement savings. Hit enter and then drag that new formula all the way down to the last year before retirement, which for me is 64. I will have to make one other little change here. For year 65, I am manually going to add the plus symbol and then click on the last contribution cell. This is because we want to use that post-retirement interest rate while still accounting for that last year of savings. So essentially what this formula is doing is adding the interest, our compound growth, year over year, and accounting for our annual contributions up until the year before retirement. Pretty cool, right? All right, so if we scroll all the way to the bottom, we can now see what my retirement bucket ending balance would be if I made $6,000 worth of contributions annually to my retirement bucket, assuming I already had the savings of just over $100,000. This also assumes I'm able to hit that annual growth rate of 8% up until 64. And then I'm hitting a 5% growth rate from retirement until my untimely death at age 100. I wonder what my cause of death should be. While that ending balance of just over $15 million might look pretty great, we are missing a crucial piece of the puzzle here. We have not yet taken into account the withdrawals or the distributions we will be taking from our retirement bucket. So let's add that in. Instead of making another column, we are actually just going to add to our formula within the retirement savings column. So let's go down to the first year of retirement, which is 65 in my case, because I am not going to touch this bucket until retirement. We are going to click on the cell under our retirement savings at age of retirement. Remember, this is the value of your collective retirement accounts once you hit retirement age. And we are going to type in the minus sign. We're then going to click on the cell that has our first year of expenses in retirement. So under annual expense column, we want that first year at age 65. Minus sign again. And then click on our cell that shows the taxes we need to pay on our first distribution. Hit enter, and then we need to manually type that in one more time to the cell below. Minus the second year's expense, minus the second year's taxes, and hit enter. Now you can drag that second year in retirement, in my case, age 66, all the way down to death. This is because we are not adding in any more contributions to our bucket. The only year we needed to account for that was the first year in retirement. Now that we have dragged that down, most likely you are going to see a negative number. I am not even going to repeat mine because it is cuckoo banana butts crazy. Not to panic. This is where we can have some fun. Okay, since 6,000 is the minimum that I generally put into my retirement, I am obviously going to start increasing this figure under the annual retirement savings column. All right, so I generally max out my Roth IRA, which is actually $6,500 for those of us under 50. And then between me and my husband, we generally do around like 9,000 in our 401ks. So let's just say collectively that we do 15,500, and let's just see what happens. One thing to keep in mind while messing around with this column, I am just dragging down that same number all the way until retirement. This means I am not increasing my contributions year over year, which hopefully you will be able to increase that slightly year over year. All right, so while that definitely helped, you can clearly see that it has not helped enough. I can actually pinpoint the year I will run out of money, which looks to be between 80 and 81. Happy birthday to me. Again, I cannot stress this enough, but this is just an estimate. Returns do not work out this perfectly. You're going to see up years where your accounts grow like 15 or 20%, and you're going to see down years where your retirement bucket actually decreases in value. Just keep that in mind while you are messing around with your numbers. All right, so I'm going to do something in my annual retirement savings column. Instead of just blanketly changing all of the cells to the same number, I am actually going to increase the amount we save a little bit each year. So the way I'm going to do that, starting next year, I want to put an extra $1,000 away into our retirement savings. So I'm just going to change this cell by clicking on the cell directly above and adding $1,000. Hit enter, go to the next cell and do the same thing. Click the cell above, plus symbol, and enter $1,000. I'm then going to highlight both of these cells and then drag this right-hand corner all the way down to the year before retirement. So now you see each year's increase by $1,000. Now let's go all the way down, and it looks like this increased savings of $1,000 per year extended my portfolio for almost a whole decade. This brings me out to like age 89, 90. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. Like I said before, my husband and I are planning to cash flow an investment property before we hit retirement age. So in the back of my head, we will have extra income coming in every year in retirement to help supplement this retirement bucket. All right, if we scroll back up and we look at that retirement savings column in the year of retirement, you can see my bucket is estimated at just shy of $6 million, which is actually pretty spot on to previous retirement calculators I have utilized. Again, this is $6 million in future dollars, not in today's dollars. Future dollars are worth less than today's dollars. Obviously, if something happens in the next few years and we realize that this is actually not going to come to fruition, we are not going to have a rental property, we just need to come in here and update the numbers accordingly. Actually, let's go ahead and do that really quickly just so you can see how I would actually update this in the future. All right, let's say in 5 years, so I would be 34, we have had a really rough time in the stock market and our total savings is only sitting at $190,000. I am going to just erase this whole formula and type in 190,000 because that is the true value of our bucket at this time. You do not need to update these annual retirement saving numbers. You can if you want, just to keep track of your savings and how they've evolved over time. But as far as the spreadsheet is concerned, your contributions are already baked into this $190,000 figure. Wow, okay, this is not good. I'm essentially running out of money now on my 86th birthday. So we have decided to scrap the whole investment property idea, which means no extra income in retirement, but it does mean we can throw some extra cash into our retirement savings that would have otherwise been earmarked for the investment property. Let's go ahead and increase this annual amount. Instead of adding $1,000 every year, let's bump that up to $1,500, so an extra $500, just to see what that looks like. Okay, not a whole lot changes, maybe bought myself another like 2 to 3 years. So let's just go balls to the wall and bump that up to like $2,500 per year, $2,500 a year. All right, so it looks like that pretty much did the trick. I am now funded through age 95 and I'm feeling pretty good about that. I don't necessarily want to increase my retirement savings any more than I already have because I just don't think that would be feasible to keep up with. One other thing I want to know, if you are choosing to be less risky with your assets and you are estimating your pre-retirement growth rate to be less, let's say 6% instead of 8%, you will need to save more money, aka higher contribution rates, into your retirement bucket. If I change my pre-retirement growth rate to 6%, I am now retiring with less than $4 million, as opposed to almost $6 million previously. That just means I will need to increase my contributions to make up that difference. Also, a nice little highlight on the power of compound growth. All right, so now that you are thoroughly acquainted with Excel and we have a good idea of how much we need to be saving for retirement, how are we feeling? If you are feeling a bit overwhelmed right now, I completely get it. We just did a ton of work. For some of you, this may be a bit of a wake-up call. For others, you might have some confirmation that you're on the right path. Either way, I want to assure you that you can do this. Everybody deserves to be able to retire at some point, and let me know what else I can do to help you along the way. I have one more episode left this year, dropping on Christmas Day. It should be a pretty fun one, so make sure to tune in. If you know someone who could use a kick in the pants, please feel free to send them this episode. If you have any questions, you can comment on YouTube, and if you want your question to be featured on an upcoming episode, ask away at the link in the show notes. Keep it rich and see you next Monday.